Hi, good evening, and welcome to this 21st Legislative District Live Telephone Town Hall with State Representatives Lillian Ortiz-Self and Strom Peterson and Senator Marko Liias. The 21st Legislative District covers parts of Snohomish County, including Mukilteo and parts of Linwood, Edmonds, and Everett. My name is Lily, and I will be your host tonight. Thank you for taking the time to join us. We are calling you today because your state legislators want to give you an update and answer your questions. So please press 0 on your phone right now to ask a question, and you'll be placed in the queue. Again, we are calling you tonight because your lawmakers want to answer your questions. Press 0 to ask them about issues that matter to you, such as healthcare, education, the environment, technology, energy, transportation, and the economy. So, if you have a question for State Representatives Lillian Ortiz-Self and Strom Peterson and Senator Marko Liias, please press 0 right now to speak with your lawmakers. Remember, press 0 on your phone right now to ask a question. Now I'll turn it over to your legislators for some opening remarks. Let's start with Representative Ortiz-Self.
Hello, everybody. This is Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self. I'm so excited to hear from you tonight. I will tell you that just as a reminder that I sit on the Education Committee, the Labor Committee, and the Early Learning and Human Services Committee, and I am part of leadership. I have been fighting hard for workers' rights and education issues for our young people, as well as making sure that behavioral health services and human services are available for all our constituents. Please give us a call. We'd love to hear from you.
All right. Thank you, folks. Press 0 if you have a question. Let's continue with Representative Strom Peterson.
Good evening, everybody. This is Strom. I live in Edmonds, and my focus this year, as it has been for the last couple of years, is really around housing. I chair the Housing Committee in the House, so we've got a lot of work that we've been doing on issues around supply as well as rent stabilization and any whole host of issues. But I also serve on the Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee and the Appropriations Committee this year. Look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you. Press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers. And finally, let's go with Senator Marko Liias.
Hi, everyone. This is Marko Liias, your state senator. I also live in North Edmonds, right near Picnic Point. It's so good to be with you. Top of mind issues for me this session are making sure that we keep our state affordable. There's really affordability problems in housing and healthcare, price of groceries. We're looking for every opportunity to try and make sure that folks can afford to live here and afford to thrive. Public safety is a top of mind priority as well, making sure that our communities not only are safe but feel safe. That means tackling issues like gun violence, but also making sure we're doing everything we can to support our law enforcement folks in our community that are keeping us all safe. And then I am so fortunate to chair our Senate Transportation Committee, so making sure that we've got a strong and sustainable transportation system is a priority for me, from our ferries to Painfield Airport to the folks that are walking and biking in our community. We want to make sure it's a safe place and a place everybody can move around. So those are top priorities. Excited to hear your questions.
All right. Thank you. Let's get started. Please press 0 on your keypad right now so that you can get your question in. We sent you a survey to gather some questions ahead of time while people get on the phone. So I'm going to take one of those internet questions first. It says here, President is attacking higher ed, and Ferguson is proposing cuts. What are you doing to protect higher education?
So I sit on the Education Committee. Obviously, protecting education is our top priority. We will probably, from our budget, that would be probably the only area that will see an increase. It would be the area of education. We're trying to protect any cuts from happening there, and we're also looking at investing dollars because we know that we need more MSOC dollars, et cetera. So that will be the area that we focus any of our big revenues in. Not saying that that won't happen in other areas, but for sure we know we're committed to making sure that education get some dollars put in it, because we have heard from all of you and we know that the need is there and exists, and because education is part of our Constitution that we must fund.
Thank you. Folks, please press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers. Next question is from Monica, and she has a question about the environment in general. It's an internet question, and all she says is, what are we doing with the environment?
Thanks, Monica, for the question. There's been a lot of really good bipartisan work on some of the environmental priorities. We just passed a bill last night that can really improve our, and this gets kind of wonky in the weeds, but really improving our transmission lines. That's something that's, critical to making sure that we're getting that we're supporting our power grid. But we're definitely also keeping an eye on areas around climate change. The Climate Commitment Act, thank you to the voters for supporting that. We are working to refine things in the Climate Commitment Act. That has been, I think, one of the biggest and most important pieces of legislation that we've passed in the last number of years, and incredibly proud of the work that was put in by so many of our colleagues to make that happen. So we're still, I think Washington is leading the nation on environmental priorities and environmental policies, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you, folks. Please press *0. No, not *0, just 0. Sorry, to get your question in. And let's see, we have one person in the queue, and let's see. I think it's Jeannie. Jeannie, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm.
The question is about how. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm 69 years old. Section 8 pays most of my rent. My income is $1,200 a month. My rent is $1,800 a month. What will the state of Washington do to help me pay my rent after Donnie Trump et al. Cuts the Section 8 housing program? I have a disability. I'm unable to return to work. I'm 69 as well.
Right. Thanks, Jeannie. Thanks for asking that. And just a couple of days ago, we passed off the House floor the rent stabilization bill, which will cap rent increases at 7%. So that's a help. And even though 7% is still, I think, high for a lot of people in our community, and maybe even for you, but we're really working to try to keep some of those other costs down. As far as what's going to happen with the federal administration, as you know, every day is a different story. So we are going to hold tight on making sure that we are helping to fund a lot of housing costs. We just passed another great bill that's going to help fund some of our rental support services to make sure that banks are paying their fair share. So we're looking at lots of different aspects of some progressive revenue to make sure that we're helping folks just like you, Jeannie, that really need it. But from the policy side, I think our rent stabilization bill is a huge win. So that's moved over to the Senate, and we look forward to getting it to the governor's desk here by the end of session.
Thank you. If you're just joining us, this is a live telephone town hall with your lawmakers from the 21st District. If you have a question for Representatives Lillian Ortiz-Self or Strom Peterson or Senator Marko Liias, please press 0 on your phone right now to get your question in. And next, we are going to hear from Brian. Brian, can you hear me? Hello,
yes,
Brian?
Well, this is Lori, his wife.
Hi, Lori. You have a question about fentanyl?
Yeah, I want to know what they're doing about the fentanyl epidemic. I know that Bob Ferguson decriminalized it, and I want to know what their plans are that we can, get help for this problem.
Lori,
You can have it around children. So I went to a home, and there's fentanyl on the counter next to a bowl of cereal. The police were called, and the police said, well, we can't do anything about it because our hands are tied. It's decriminalized. They decriminalized fentanyl. And I just want to know what the plan is to get people in trouble that are having this around children.
Yeah, great question. I can't speak to your interaction there with the police officers, but it is illegal in Washington State to abuse fentanyl and to have it around children. And we've done some work in the last couple of years in particular to make sure that our child endangerment law makes sure that kids are safe and that they aren't exposed to dangerous drugs. Overall, though, the fentanyl crisis is real in our communities. That's why, in my opening remarks, I shared that public safety is a priority. We need to make sure that we have law enforcement resources, folks on patrol in our communities, and folks like our regional drug task force working to stop the spread of fentanyl. We also, as a state, sued the opioid manufacturers and won in court. So we've received tens of millions of dollars that we're investing in more treatment and support, because we want not just to stop the spread of this terrible drug, but also help the folks whose lives have been torn apart by it. So the legislature, working with our counties and cities, are investing dollars to stop the spread of it and to help the folks who have been caught up in addiction to get the recovery and support they need. Governor Ferguson does not support legalizing fentanyl. He's been at the front lines as the Attorney General to help win that lawsuit against the opioid manufacturers, and we're working together with him this year to make sure there's services, support, and law enforcement resources to tackle this terrible threat in our community.
All right. Thank you very much. Our next question is about rent stabilization, and this is Lewis. Hi, Lewis. Can you hear me? Hello, Lewis?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, go ahead. Ask your question, please.
Okay, excellent. Hi, Lillian, Strom, and Marko. It's good to hear from you guys. I'm curious about this rent stabilization. I know I heard Strom say a little bit about it, but, several of us have received a postcard specifically from Senator Liias about not supporting it. And so just wondering where where everybody is on the sides of that.
Yeah, thanks, Lewis. I just saw that postcard. It is not from Senator Liias. I want to emphasize that. Take a closer look, because when I first saw it, I went, what? So it's from either the Rental Housing Association or one of these big organizations are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars targeting senators to try to get them to vote no on House Bill 1217, which is the rent stabilization bill. And this is one of those. I've heard from a couple of other senators around the state that they're also being targeted with, I think, a lot of misinformation. So take a closer look at that. But it is something they want you to mail to Senator Liias to tell him to vote no. But it is deceiving at best. So just want to emphasize that, and again, appreciate that you brought that up so we can clear the air, as I imagine some other folks on this call might be getting that postcard.
Yeah, I haven't checked my mail. I'm down in Olympia, so I haven't seen that. Thanks, Strom. This is Marko. I am very supportive of doing everything we can. That's why I said affordability is top of mind for me this session, and the cost of housing is out of reach. We heard from Jeannie earlier in the call, who's struggling, in her life to pay rent. I look forward to working with Strom. I met with the sponsor of the bill, Senator Alvarado, today to talk through the details, and we got to do everything we can to tackle the cost of rent. We also have to make sure we get the details of this bill right. We know that there's a lot of small landlords in our community that are doing good stuff, so I look forward to getting a balanced bill that makes sure that it helps our landlords, but also helps our renters like Jeannie that are struggling, and I'm going to keep doing that all the way up until we finish.
Thank you. Folks, please remember to press 0 if you have a question for Representatives Lillian Ortiz-Self, Strom Peterson, or your Senator Marko Liias. Next is an internet question from Melissa, and Melissa asks, what is the state doing to prevent the Trump administration from logging and destroying our beautiful Washington national parks?
That's a great question. I have the chance to serve on our Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee in the Senate, and making sure that our wild and scenic places are protected is a high priority for the legislature. We also have a great new Attorney General, Nick Brown, who every time we see the Trump administration come out with these illegal and unconstitutional orders, he's taken them to court. So I know the team is looking closely at these orders around logging and timber to make sure that they're following the law and that we're protecting our resources here. I'll also say that our new Commissioner of Public Lands, Dave Updegrove, has taken a really strong position to make sure we're protecting some of our most special forests in this state. So it's a high priority for the legislature to protect these wild and scenic places. We also are going to fight the Trump administration when they do illegal things. So appreciate that, and we're going to be fighting hard to make sure we keep the Evergreen State green.
Thank you. Press 0 if you have a question. Next up, we're going to hear from Chrisanne. I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly. Chrisanne, can you hear me?
I am here. I'm here.
Hi.
Yes.
Please ask your question.
Thank you so much for doing this. And actually, I was planning on going to the in-person on Saturday, which I might still go just to connect with other people. My question, though, is sorry. My question is about my sweet little young man. I am the mother of a developmentally disabled 23-year-old young man. He's got Down syndrome and autism, and he's completely nonverbal and very dependent on us. And he's got medical issues, and I'm concerned about Medicaid being lost. And like for now, we'd be okay because we have good insurance through my husband, and because of the ACA, Ethan gets to be on my husband's insurance, but I'm worried they're going to take that away too. I want to know what can be done to make sure they don't get rid of Medicaid or throw people off of Medicaid that really need it. And just for disabled people in general, the services that for him, he has us, he lives with us, and he'll be okay, but his friends, his whole community from Special Olympics and through the Alyssa Burnett Center that he takes some classes, a lot of them live in group homes and live on Social Security. And what is being done to protect them? And what can I as a citizen do to make sure that their needs are recognized?
Yeah. Hello, this is Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self. As one of my roles is to meet with the Attorney General's office on a regular basis to try to stay abreast of all the executive orders that are coming down our way. What I can tell you is that it would be an extreme burden on the state to try to cover what all the everything that the federal government covers, such as Medicaid. We are already looking at losing some of the Medicaid expansion dollars, and we're really concerned about that as well. Our Attorney General assures me that if there's anything that they could do as far as bringing on a lawsuit for improperly taking away of funds and leaving states destitute, that he is ready to jump on it, and we are ready to support him in any way that we can. That would really be a travesty for our community, for our constituents, and for your son, it sounds like, as well as for many. So thank you for bringing that issue up.
Thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question. Next up is an internet question from Jonathan. I am very concerned about the state of the corrections system, particularly for youth. Are we doing anything to reform this situation?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jonathan. So I think it was yesterday. It's been a crazy few days down here in Olympia, but yesterday we passed a bill that I had introduced to really help a lot of those young people down at Green Hill. The prosecutor in the county down there has been charging these kids for felonies for just maybe getting into a fist fight with a couple of them. This is something that's not used, hasn't been used in our adult corrections, but some of these kids have been facing, extra sentences, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years. So we passed a bill, bipartisan bill, off the floor of the House to get rid of this charge. It's called the prison riot charge. And I was working with somebody who works at Green Hill, who volunteers at Green Hill, and is doing some really good work down there. So I'm hoping this helps alleviate the system. I think we also need to make more investments in education and make sure these kids are getting the programming that they need so we can rehabilitate them. This is our chance to really do some good interdiction. So we've been making more investments and really understanding the, brain development that, you suddenly don't become a wise, clear-thinking adult at 21. So we have, kids, young people up to 25 years old will still be in our youth detention facilities if they committed the crime before a certain age. And that gives us as a state a great opportunity to make sure that we reduce recidivism, ultimately save the state money, and get some of these young people's lives back on track.
And this is Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self. I was very grateful to be able to get House Bill 1747 off the House floor. It's the Fair Chance Act expansion that really helps with those that were formerly incarcerated to be able to have a fair chance at getting a job interview and hopefully being able to get employment once they come out. Because one of the biggest areas that affect recidivism is them being able to be gainfully employed. And so we want to make sure we keep looking at what barriers do we need to remove so that our young people and anybody for that matter who's been incarcerated, 95% of them are coming back home, and what do we do to make that transition as successful as possible so they can contribute back to society?
Thank you. Folks, press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers tonight. Okay, so I want to tell you that there are many people in the 21st who are very concerned about what is coming out of the other Washington. So we're just going to take one of these calls because a lot of people are basically asking the same question. So let's hear from Nora. Hi, Nora. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. Yes, I can.
Go ahead.
And I first want to just say thank you for holding this and the in-person one coming up on Saturday. You all are working very hard, which we all appreciate. And we in the community are trying our best to figure out what are the most effective ways that we can perhaps make some change. There are people doing phone calls, emailing, protests, demonstrations, rallies. We're just trying to figure out what are the most effective things that we can do to try to stop this craziness in the other Washington, as you put it.
Well, thank you, Nora. I mean, I think the first step is we all, as Americans, have an obligation to stand up and speak out against the heinous and unconstitutional things that this administration is doing. So I'm glad that you're whether it's sending an email, making a phone call, attending a rally or a protest, writing a letter to the editor, all these things matter because in our democracy, when the people speak, that's how we make change. The other thing I'll say is, as your representatives in Olympia, we are working day in and day out to make sure that Washington remains a bastion for equality and opportunity, a place that people are safe to exercise all of their freedoms in this country, including freedoms to access reproductive care or gender-affirming care. We want to make sure that our state remains a safe and welcoming place. I also just want to give a huge shout out to our Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self, who was a champion in passing our Keep Washington Working Act to make sure that our local law enforcement is not being used and weaponized to prosecute the federal government's unconscionable attacks on immigrant communities. So here in Washington, we're going to keep standing up for our values, but it's on all of us to stand up and speak out. So keep exercising your First Amendment rights to speak out and stand up, and we're going to keep fighting in Olympia to make sure Washington remains a bastion of opportunity and freedom.
Thank you. We are halfway through this call, so if you have a question, please press 0 right now to get your question in. And let's see, next we're going to hear from Samir, who has questions about housing and labor. Samir, can you hear me?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep, go ahead, ask your question, please.
Perfect. So I kind of have a two-pronged question. I'll first do a little introduction. I'm Samir. I'm 23. I was born and raised in Snohomish County, been in Washington my whole life. So recently we've seen a lot of private equity firms and hedge funds buying up homes in and around the Seattle area. And that's raised costs for young people like me to try to get into the housing market. Question one is, what are we going to do about institutional investment? And how do we balance that with, appropriate risk for people who want to invest themselves? And then the second question sort of relates to labor laws. A lot of big tech companies in the area and in general are switching over to contract employees instead of paying full-time employees because they don't have to pay out benefits or insurance. And I'm wondering if you guys have any plan to go through and check out labor protections in these areas. And I know Seattle is a huge market for big tech people, so this is important to a lot of us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Samir. A couple of really great questions. I'll jump at the housing one. We had a couple of bills this year that unfortunately didn't make it past what we call cutoff. So this year they're done, but we had one bill in the Senate that really tried to address these private equity companies buying up swaths of homes, right? They'll buy entire subdivisions, as you know, and turn them into rentals, and oftentimes just trying to make a quick buck, and so the neighborhood kind of goes, they don't take good care of the properties. So this is something that's happening all around the country. So we had a bill to try to limit that. It's super complicated and all sorts of different federal things, but we are definitely taking a look at it. And then I helped craft a bill in the House, kind of with the same thing with manufactured housing communities. So we have, a few thousand manufactured housing communities across the state. There are, quite a few in the 21st district. And again, a lot of times these private equity companies are coming in and buying these communities up, jacking up the rents, often leaving people no choice but to abandon their homes or be economically evicted. So we're trying on that front again. We'll keep these conversations going to see what we can do. This was something that the Biden administration had been looking at. That obviously is going to be a different calculation now with a different federal government. But may kick it over on some of the issues on workers' protection. I know that Lillian used to be on the labor committee.
I still am.
She's still on the labor committee.
Yes. So we heard a lot of different labor protection bills. I wanted to highlight our paid family and medical leave benefits that we passed out of the House. That strengthens that so that more families have access to that. One that might have really helped in the situation you're talking about as far as part-time contractors, unfortunately, we were not able to get out of the House. It was one that I sponsored that I will be bringing back, where unemployment insurance is accessible to our part-time workers. We have a funny law that if you work more than 11 hours, you fall into a different category, and those that we want to clarify what part-time workers mean and how they can access their unemployment insurance. Let's see, what else? We did pass 1644. It strengthens protections for working minors in Washington state. That was crucial with some accidents that were happening on job sites. And in our tech companies, we are allowing workers to bargain over the use of AI in our House Bill 1622. Those are a few. We can always, you could always contact our office. Be glad to share any more of them with you.
Thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question for your Washington state lawmakers. Next up is an internet question from Claudia. School bonds are critical for our kids to have a safe place to learn and to fix outdated schools. What are you doing to ensure we continue to build our schools?
Well, Claudia, we are hoping to pass a simple majority bill that would allow a simple majority to be able to pass a bond in our school systems. And we're really hoping that this will be the year that we can get that through, and that can make a big difference. We have been trying to pass this for a few years now, and it seems to me that the time is right when all these cuts are happening to at least give the authority to our local communities to be able to do what is best for them and best for their children in the school system.
Thank you. Folks, please press 0 if you have a question. Next up, we are going to go with, let's see, Timothy, and I believe this is a question about road maintenance. Hi, Timothy. Timothy?
I'm here. Yes.
Ask your question.
I thought I was recorded, and they were going to play it. Sorry. I had a question about road maintenance. Why is road maintenance ignored? Bridge maintenance ignored? I-5 absolutely beats me to death every time I drive up and down it. We pay very high road tax. We pay very high tax on everything in this state. I mean, they even tax the rainwater and as stormwater runoff. Money is spent like it's no tomorrow, but yet the roads are in terrible shape. They're spending billions of dollars on these fish passages by some court order, and the rest of the roads are just being ignored. Why is something not done about that? I mean, I saw something recently where I-5 had not been maintained since it was built in 1963.
Timothy, that's a great question, and you got the chair of the Transportation Committee here, so I got a lot to share on this, but I don't want to take up the rest of our call on it. It is true that we need to do a better job of preserving and maintaining our roadways. The challenge we face is the cost of maintaining those roads has just gone up over the years, and because people are driving more efficient cars, which we love, the gas taxes we're paying are going down. So costs are going up. The revenue to support is going down. That's created a structural problem. We're working on it diligently this year to bring forward some ideas to make sure we're doing a better job on maintenance and preservation of our roads, and not just our state highways. We also need to make sure that our local county and city roads are also in good repair. I will say on I-5, we have kept it maintained since 1962, but it is a really old structure. And we've got to do more to rebuild it in the years to come. So that's part of the challenge we've got in front of us. And as for tax and rainwater, I wish we could, because we would make a lot of money in this state, but we do not tax rainwater. We just do our best to make sure that as it makes its way to the Salish Sea, through the streams that our salmon and our orca depend on, that it's clean and that it's not polluting, our communities. So that's our focus, but appreciate the concern. And I will say affordability and making sure that folks can afford to live in Washington is something we're looking very closely at. So we got to balance our need to invest in our transportation system and also make sure that we remain an affordable place to live. That's a tough job, but we're going to keep working on it this session.
Thank you. Our next question is internet question from Jake. Okay, Jake asks, one side is saying $6 billion. You are saying $12 billion. The governor the other day said $15 billion. What is the actual number? And also, what about the rainy day fund? I thought we had that for something when we need it.
Well, that's a great question, Jake. First of all, it's hard when you think about the budget because we have a 2-year and a 4-year budget requirement. So we have to balance the budget for the next 2 years, which is what we're working on now. We also have to make sure by state law that it balances for 4 years because we want to be looking long term and making sure we're making wise decisions. So some of the reason the numbers you hear kind of jump around is because some folks are talking about what's the budget gap in this current 2-year budget we're writing, what's the gap across 4 years. It can be very confusing. I get it. The bottom line is we have to pass a balanced budget, and we have to make sure we strengthen education and that we keep Washington affordable. That's a really hard job. The state's rainy day fund is there. Now, it is not at the level that will support the whole deficit. So the costs of providing state services have not kept up with the dollars we collect to pay for them. And so even though we do have a rainy day fund, it's not enough to fill the gap we've got. That's why the governor, legislature are working really hard to identify what are places that we can reprioritize. You know, a lot of stuff's important, but we're going to have to make tough choices. And then are there some places where we should be asking folks, particularly those that are at the very top of the economy that have benefited, that are doing well, if they can chip in some more to help support critical services like education and healthcare. That's our job. We've got about 45 days to go. In just a week and a half, the budget proposals from the House and Senate will come out. That'll provide another sign of how we're going to get to a balanced budget that takes care of all of us. Complicated topics, but really, really important, and I'm glad you raised it.
Thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question. Next is Anton, who has a question about, I think, public safety. Anton?
Yes. I called asking about what would it take to hold our judges more accountable for re-releasing violent offenders. There's plenty of examples, been in the news of repeat offenders getting processed and then being let loose, and then worst case scenario, they end up taking a person's life or causing a lot more harm to a community than they would if they would have just stayed in jail. Because of these loose revolving door policies when it comes to criminals, like I've felt so unsafe in my own city that last year I got my first ever conceal and carry because I have a daughter, and I dread the day that I'd ever have to defend myself or her life because of one of these criminals that have been let loose because of some very crazy policies. There's been plenty of examples in the last couple of years. I can't name all of them off the top of my head, but I think if anybody's ever turned on the news or looked into anything about some of the violent offenses, would find out that these are people that have been processed already, but then were released once again. And it seems like with certain judges, this has happened more than just one time. Sometimes.
Great. Well, thanks for that. Obviously, a very complicated question and a lot of work that we're doing here in Olympia to really address the continuum of public safety. So we have just passed a bill off the floor of the House, House Bill 2015, which is going to make investments in law enforcement officers, it's going to make investments in treatment programs, it's going to make investments in diversion courts, all of the things that will make our communities be safer and also feel safer. I know it's doesn't feel true, but you know, our violent crime statistics are down quite a bit. Property crimes are still an issue. But the other issue, the other problem that to kind of address your question is we do have 3 branches of government. So there's, you know, we have some judicial oversight, but they are elected. You know, our Superior Court judges, our District Court judges are independently elected. Our Supreme Court justices are independently elected. So we do have, you know, that system here in the United States of making sure that we have 3 co-equal branches of government. So there are some limits as to what we can do for specific judges that might be in question. But we know that the key is not just locking people up for long periods of time. That didn't work back in the 80s. That didn't work in the 90s. We need to make sure that we're getting people the treatment that they need, the education that they need while they're incarcerated. So when they do get out, that they become, you know, strong members of our community. So appreciate the question. Still lots of work to do on that front here in the next few weeks as we finish up. Well, and years beyond that, but certainly in the next few weeks.
Thank you. Folks, please press 0 on your phones if you have a question for your lawmakers. Next up is an internet question from Maria, or Maria, I don't know, who has a question about, let's see, child care. She says, I am very concerned about the cost of child care. I don't know how I'm going to manage with 2 little kids.
It is a concern that we hear statewide. One of the reasons for the increase in child care as well is the shortage that exists in the field. So one of the things we did this year is we passed a bill to extend the time that providers have to get trained so there's some requirements that are put on by the state that are, with COVID and everything else, a lot of providers have not been able to get done, and we don't want to lose any more child care providers in our state. So we have extended the amount of time they have to receive that training and given them credit for the work experience they have in their centers, and extended it out for 5 years in order to give them time to be able to recoup that, make sure we don't close down any child care facilities that are doing great work for our children, so that we can try to keep the cost down by providing more opportunities.
All right, thank you. And it is time for a live poll. So the question is, which issue do you feel most affects your daily life? 1 is cost of housing. 2, cost of basic needs like food or housing. 3 is education funding. And 4 is transportation. Okay. Right, next up we have somebody who didn't leave a name, I don't think. Wait a minute. Okay. In the meantime, while I find that, let us go with Cheryl, who has a question about health care.
Hi there.
Cheryl.
Hi. Okay, so my question regards medical services within the state. I read in the Herald that there was a bill introduced to try to get universal health care in Washington State for all Washington State residents. And I want to know the status of that bill and what can be done to support it. I've lived in other countries where there is universal health care, and it is a good deal for everybody. The second part of that is I know we are having a doctor shortage. What is being done to get more people into our 2 medical schools?
Thanks, Cheryl. Great question. I'm proud to co-sponsor that measure on universal health care because I think we've got to get to a place in our state where we recognize that health care is a human right, not a privilege that should be for few. Unfortunately, with the budget crisis we've got in front of us, that particular bill has had to take a little bit of a back burner as we're struggling to just meet our basic obligations for our K through 12 schools and education broadly. So we're going to continue to work on that. Just because that bill didn't advance, though, we are focused laser-like on healthcare affordability. We have, in recent years, passed a cap on insulin copays at $35 a month because we want to make sure folks can afford essential prescriptions. We also have worked to protect our essential health benefits here under state law, so no matter what the Trump administration does, Washingtonians can continue to access that care. We've also worked to expand health care so that everybody in our state, regardless of your immigration status, can access life-saving care. We've got to make sure that care is available, that it's affordable, that it's accessible. And I will say the question of how do we get more doctors in the field, we're also working on the residencies that they need. It's not just about the training. They also need to have that training on the ground in the healthcare setting. So we're working to expand that. And another really exciting measure is to make sure that folks who get medical credentials overseas and come here, that we can work to quickly get them credentialed as well, our international medical graduates. So a number of things we're doing to get more providers out there. We also are working diligently with all the healthcare mergers that are happening to make sure that there's antitrust reviews. We passed legislation in the Senate to make sure that we have strong antitrust protections, that our Attorney General can make sure that there's not unfair competition. So across the board, we're focused on healthcare affordability. It's a huge cost for folks. Sorry, the one other thing as I think through my list here is also making sure that medical debt that folks have doesn't impact their ability to get an apartment, to get a job, to get all the other sorts of things we need in the economy. So we're going to make sure that medical debt doesn't ding your credit score because we know, folks, it's an impossible choice. When you need life-saving care, you need it, and we need to make sure that that isn't financially ruining people in more ways than one. So a number of the measures we're doing, we got to stay focused on getting to universal coverage, but we've got a lot to balance in this very complex session.
Thank you. Okay, so the poll, I'm going to give it to you again. We've gotten several responses, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot more people on the line. So press 1 if the cost of housing is an issue that you feel most affects your daily life. Press 2 if the cost of basic needs like food or housing you feel most affects your daily life. Press 3 if it's education funding, and press 4 if it's transportation. 1 for cost of housing, 2 for cost of basic needs, 3 for education funding, and 4 for transportation. Next, we're going to go with a question about landlords and rent, but this person did not leave a name, so hopefully they will recognize the last 3 digits of their phone. 650, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, my name is Tina. So I am a landlord, and we've been hit as an independent, small-time landlord. We've been hit terribly with the rules and new laws with regards to what would be considered possibly affordable housing to, for tenants, and everything seems to be running toward the tenant side for laws without regard to the landlords, and the landlords are being nickel and dimed. And what's happening is that a lot of small landlords are now getting out of the business because they can't afford it, which is.
Oops, I think you cut out there, but I can work to answer some of your concerns. Of course, here in Washington, we do have, a pretty unique situation where landlords don't pay any business and operating taxes. So that's something that's been on the books for a long time here in the state of Washington, and I think that's probably a pretty big help to support landlords, whether they're larger landlords or smaller landlords. We do have a landlord mitigation account, so we know that some landlords are suffering when, they have some pretty big expenses when a tenant moves out, and there's access to funding directly from the state through the document recording fee. And then, of course, the rental assistance programs that we've had, that's money that's going directly to landlords if somebody is behind on their rent, and especially during the pandemic. So really making sure that we wanted to support landlords in that instance as well. A couple of the other things that, we're working on, again, with the rent stabilization bill is kind of one part of this 3-part stool. We've also, over the past number of years in Washington State, we've done more than any other state to really help the supply side of things. So helping get homes built, and whether that's, and housing built. So that's through permit reform, or making sure that cities aren't, zoning out the possibility for increased density, like a duplex or a triplex or an ADU. We've passed well over 3 dozen bills in the last few years to really help landlords and realtors and developers create the kind of housing that we need across Washington State. We're in a housing crisis, and right now those that are suffering the most are really folks like Dolores, who was one of our first callers, who's facing increased rents, even though she's on a very fixed income. So it's a balancing act. I think we're striking that balance with all the different pieces of legislation that we're passing, but always open to have more conversations.
Thank you. Okay, we have about 12 minutes left of this call, and Lindsay has a question about free speech. Hi, Lindsay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I am the parent. I'm the parent of a college student at the University of Washington, and I was really dismayed to hear about the Trump administration weaponizing the Civil Rights Act to target for colleges and universities in Washington State. Very concerned, especially after what's happened at Columbia University in New York. Wondering if there's any plans in place or anything being done to protect free speech on our campuses in the state.
Lindsay, great question. I actually have had a chance to teach part-time at the University of Washington, and was there last spring when there was a lot of student free speech and protest happening. And that's part of young people exercising their First Amendment rights. And I think it's really critical that our educational institutions teach young people how to exercise their freedom of speech. I think that's critically important. This is another case where our Attorney General, Nick Brown, is carefully monitoring the actions of the Trump administration and bringing lawsuits to stop and halt and get injunctions against their illegal actions. So I'm confident that the Attorney General and his team are carefully reviewing this. This is also another opportunity to just shout out, we can't cheer Lillian Ortiz-Self on enough, because the Keep Washington Working Act means that our local law enforcement resources will not be used on these witch hunts by the Trump administration, and we are grateful that we have that in place. So our Attorney General, our state laws, we also have, fantastic leaders at our campuses that are doing their part to create safe and welcoming educational environments. Obviously, free speech, can be a little messy and chaotic. Not everybody agrees. We've got to help create environments where young people or students can stand up and speak out in respectful and constructive ways, and that's a critical mission of our universities.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we have a question from someone who did not leave a name. It's an internet question. I'm going to read it to you. Washington hospitals are being bought by religious organizations. They are limiting access to reproductive care. Is that on your radar, and what can we do to protect Washingtonians to ensure they can exercise their reproductive rights at all healthcare facilities in the state?
So it is on our radar. We actually had our very own Senator Emily Randall had a bill. She's now in Congress. She was working on a bill to stop those mergers and to put in requirements on there. Unfortunately, that did not pass, but it is something that's on our radar, something that we're very passionate about, working with the AG's office on antitrust measures. I'll tell you, reproductive freedom is one of the things that we have invested a lot of time in securing the protections as much as we possibly can, including things like making sure physicians are protected if they perform any kind of reproductive freedom, any kind of reproductive medical services for people coming in from out of state. Making sure they're protected, opening our doors to people from out of state as well, ensuring privacy. We're just trying to do everything we can, our insurance coverage, to make sure that everyone has the rights that they deserve. We have House Bill 1589 set standards for negotiating between carriers and providers, helping small providers remain independent, and allowing patients to have more coverage, to have coverage on more services. Things like this is what we keep trying to put in place to ensure that people have access, and we'll continue to fight towards that end.
All right, thank you. Now for our last question of the evening, it is an internet question from Nancy, who says, I was watching part of the debate last night, and it got really confusing and really late. So in the end, what does the bill do?
So at the end, the bill expands parental rights, expand students' rights, and protects teachers from retaliation for caring and listening to students. So we in the Education Committee highly, and we here as your representatives, highly believe in parental involvement. We believe that parents are the ultimate authority for their children. We also believe that parents' beliefs are not something that they can demand everyone else to believe. So we do respect religious freedom. We stand highly on by protecting anti-discrimination law based on gender, race, religion, etc. And we will protect our teachers, our parents, and our educators to that end.
Okay, thank you. Now the poll results. Here we go. So 9% of you think that transportation affects your daily life the most. After that, it's education funding with 17%. 23% say that the cost of housing is the one that affects your life the most, and 51% say that it's the cost of basic needs like food or housing. That is all for tonight. We're going to hear from our legislators with closing remarks, and we're going to start the other way around. Senator Liias, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for participating. It's so wonderful. We made it through about 20 questions and on so many diverse topics. And I love the stories. I love, Jeannie, your story about what you're doing to try and make ends meet and cover the cost of rent. I'm going to keep that story with me as we talk about housing affordability. Chris-Ann, we love to hear your son in the background, and we're going to make sure we take care of everyone in our state, but especially those who are developmentally disabled, who need that extra support. In fact, the last bill the Senate passed last night was to fully fund our special education system in this state so that all of our families get the education they deserve. And I love Timothy bringing up road maintenance as the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. So thank you for these great questions, for the topics you've raised. They're going to be on our minds as we keep doing the work over the next 45 days. I'll just close by saying, I know you spent some time on the line tonight. You are still warmly welcome to join us Saturday morning at Mariner High School. We would love to see you at 10 a.m. In person. It's wonderful to be in community, to be in a room together, to have this discussion together. So I hope you'll consider it. It's been the privilege of my life to represent our community, the community I grew up in the state Senate. I look forward to continuing to do this work, and so grateful to have these amazing team members, Strom and Lillian, in this work. Thanks so much, and see you on Saturday.
Okay, next up, please, Representative Strom Peterson.
Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Just to echo what my dear senator and good friend Marko is saying about how important it is to see people in person. It's always great to have you come by and have conversations and meet some of your friends and neighbors that might have similar opinions or very different opinions, but know that we can really have good discussions and still walk away as positive members of our community. I always like to say a couple of the things about Olympia. About 85% of the bills that we pass are strongly bipartisan. So very few people really can think that way when the other Washington gets all the headlines, but we really do strong work to make sure that as we're Democrats and in the majority, that we really want to listen to the minority's point of view. They have good ideas, and sometimes we don't think they have good ideas, but we want to make sure we have the conversation. And the other thing is our staff. I mean, our staff that has helped put this together, our staff that helps write the bills and do all the work that so we can get things done for the people of Washington. I think your best tax dollars are spent on both our caucus staff, whether it's House Republicans or House Democrats, or Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats, or especially our nonpartisan staff. So we've got great teams down here. We're really trying to work hard for all of Washington, and it's, as Marko said, it's an honor to represent the 21st District.
And we're going to finish, of course, with Representative Lillian Ortiz-Self.
Thank you, everybody, for listening in. I love talking about all these issues that we feel are dear and to the heart of all our constituents. So it's a nice reminder to have that reinforced. Housing needs and your basic needs, education, transportation, those are the issues we keep hearing about. Add to that child care, mental health support, prison reform. We hear you. There are all these issues that we've been working on as well. Some we've made more progress than others, but we will continue to fight for all of these. And we hope to really see you in person on Saturday. Please tell your friends. Can't wait to see you.